I was writing a little bit about, wonder what this is going to do to grading, because obviously the glasses are a closed system that locks out all external light. So can color graders just use this in lieu of a equally expensive or more expensive color grading suite? And can you grade by the swimming pool successfully? Why wouldn't you be able to? And if
Because a producer can't sit over your shoulder and go, that's too green.
There's another plus. I'm so sorry, I cannot show you what I'm doing. This is built just for my noggin, not yours. So it's those little peripheral things that I hadn't thought about until I went, oh. Man, I don't have to work in a room like that and spend all that money on painting the walls just the right gray?
Hey, we could use some more questions, huh? Ooh. We could be getting to that WWDC pretty quickly.
Ooh, I get to say superfluous this morning. I'm excited. Thank you, Jason. Oh, he left.
Isn't the pronunciation superfluous?
No, it's not. You're thinking of Superfly. Totally different thing.
Superfluous account of.
Robert. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital media production. And our second hour is something we'd like to spend a little bit more time on. And so we're going to be talking about WWDC. We've had a week to think about all the things that were released at WWDC, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. We may have a special guest for the second hour to talk with us about that. So stay tuned for that. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Alexander says, Roland has released a new 4K live streaming switcher. It looks good overall, but with some drawbacks and odd choices. The USB 3.2 streaming is limited to SDR 4K 30. What do we think? And he's got a link there.
Good, Courtney.
Well, I briefly took a look at the website and the video. It uses a touch interface. It has two, looks like about 6-inch, 5-inch or 6-inch touch screens on it. And it looks like you operate it by touching your buttons. It also has a 4-input mixer built into it. It's a desktop device, and it looks like its inputs are oriented a little bit more toward the consumer version of inputs because it's all HDMI, and it looks like it has some consumer-grade audio inputs as well as for XLR combo inputs that are 1/4-inch and XLR audio inputs. So that's nice to see the audio in there. Alex would hate it because all the I/O, of course, is on the back of the unit. It looks like it's designed for the AV market where you're going in and doing a one show in a ballroom somewhere, and you're setting it up and wiring everything up to the back of this console. And then at the end of the show, you're tearing it down and putting everything back in cases. So it doesn't look like, you could build it in very easily to a fly pack or something. I guess you could with a convenience panel in the back to do something like that. It does allow 4K, as was mentioned in the question, 4K streaming using USB 3.2 for doing that. I guess it remains to be seen how good the interface is and how good the streaming is. But it's interesting, the touch panel effect for switching is a bit different, but at least you know what you're going to switch to because it's on the button that you're switching to.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty interesting. Roland has really found a niche, I think, that they can fulfill for especially corporate and education and so on and so forth. That I think is actually it's pretty useful. I still would probably end up with the same money. I'd probably still end up with a Blackmagic solution, but the audio is going to work. So Blackmagic stuff isn't really known for that, and we know that Roland has done a pretty good job of incorporating audio, so the mic inputs and so on and so forth. Another interesting thing to look at when you look at this switcher specifically is that it has a region of interest in ROI. And the reason that the region of interest is interesting is because you can, if you're doing a 1080p show, but you have 4K cameras, it allows you to crop into those cameras. So you can do, little, I don't know whether it's going to animate, between those looks, but it looks like a lot of us have done that in the past, but that hardware has been relatively expensive to do that effectively, to do it really nicely, to have little moves and so on and so forth across a 4K frame hasn't been something that's been super easy. So if they've cracked that and if they're doing a pretty good job of it, I think it's a really interesting thing, especially again for corporate. And the problem is that people take it too far. So they go, I'm going to have one wide shot and I'm going to crop it on this person and I'm going to crop it on this person. And what you end up with, the real challenge with using only one camera is when two people are talking like this, and then you have a camera here and you're doing a crop to here and a crop to here. They're looking at each other. And so you end up seeing the sides of both of their faces. And it's not a great experience. And so that's why a lot of us want to put cameras physically out here so that when this person is looking over this way, what I always want to see when I'm designing camera shots is that I want to see the far corner of the far eye. The far corner of the far eye, if I can see that, then I feel like I've got enough of it to make that actually work. And so, but the being able to punch in is still useful. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex just came up with a producer I work with all the time. Yesterday, we were talking about camera shots and framing and whatnot, exactly what you were just talking about. And we sent a crew out, a producer, to shoot a piece. And they did the typical, I'm talking to the camera over here kind of thing. And the executive producer looked at it. She goes, "Why didn't they use an eyeliner and Teratron, whatever?" Like, how much do you think? And I apologize, I'm going slightly off topic. How much do you think the last 3 years of Zoom meetings has affected or will affect the way we shoot video going forward?
I think it's made a big difference. Yeah, absolutely. I think that people are used to looking in this straight up. And what's interesting is I think that people are used to looking at straight up and having a single person in every window. So I actually, when I do stuff now, I prefer to have people looking straight into a camera. I don't even like having them in the same room, to be honest. I'd rather have them go through a Teratron. Now, we started doing a Teratron in 2008. So we've been, for us, Interatrons were kind of second nature. As Hangout started, we already had 5 kits sitting around, so we just applied them, and so that became kind of our norm. So long before COVID, we were doing. I got to the point where I just didn't want to ever see an over the show like this look, where I'm looking at someone off, and it feels so old now. Like it just feels like an old vestige of the past.
I think the reason we did it is that non-professional talent don't understand looking at a camera. I think the last 3 years has gotten most of us over that.
Yeah, and the non-professional talent, you needed to give them someone to look at so that they could respond. And now the Teratron gives them someone to look at without having to, but it allows them to look straight into it. And I think that's going to become more and more the thing. And I think it's not just COVID; it's also it's TikTok, it's YouTube. The YouTubers and TikTok are looking straight into the cameras, so they're getting used to it. I'll argue that some of the top TikTokers, if you really look at what they're good at, they're really good at looking right into the lens. They're not looking at the camera. They're looking to the center of that lens. I had a discussion with a TikToker about that, and they said you really have to hone in on the center of the lens to get that connection with the audience. And this person who had about 55 million followers. So anyway, he knew what he was talking about. So anyway, but he was talking about the fact that you just had to look. You have to look right into that center of the lens to have that connection. He said a lot of TikTokers look at the wrong lens. Like he's literally said that they have 3 lenses for their iPhone and they look at the wrong lens. And he said that takes away, even just that little change to him took away from the connection that you get with the audience. So you had to know which lens you were looking at to be able to look straight into their eyes.
What was super interesting about this conversation I had with this executive producer, she said, who was that guy that we started working with at the beginning of COVID? He was like from Europe or something. I said, Felipe? She goes, yeah. He was always looking right at me. And it was really, and it like 3 years later, she remembered how important Felipe's eye contact was with her when he talked to her from, Prague.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Getting back to the switcher we were talking about, I did look a little further at it, and it has, as far as doing 4K, it's kind of strangely set up in that it has only 3 4K inputs. It has 7 HDMI inputs, but only 3 4K inputs can be combined with a 4th, which is handled over an aux bus. So these other, the first 3, 1, 2, and 3, go in and can be freely switched and composited together in the crosspoint switcher. But these other 4 inputs go into a sub-selector here, and so you can use only 4, the 3 main and whatever is selected on the aux switcher here to do your composites with. So there are some limitations to this. Maybe it operates slightly differently in HD mode versus 4K mode, since all the inputs seem to be running through a scan converter, standards converter, so it can handle different resolutions, and it automatically handles HDR, SDR, and Rec 2020 and 709 color space. So,
did we see a price? They don't put prices.
I haven't looked at the price yet. I think there's a where to buy button.
There's a where to buy, and then it goes to send us your email. I mean, yeah. I will say that
we're going to make up a price later when we see what the reaction is.
It's one of the things that drives me a little crazy is when people, like, anytime you have to have an incredible product for me to go to your website and you don't give me a price. It has to be just unbelievable, because otherwise I just write it off. I'm just like, I don't need to talk to these guys. Now, next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas Carmichael says, Apple mentioned that PCIe DSP cards are one use case where the Apple Silicon Mac Pro trumps the Mac Studio with the native processing power of the Mac Studio and even UAD moving into the native market. Wouldn't the DSP cards be superfluous?
Go, Jason.
There's nothing superfluous about having your cards inside of a machine. The power availability and the reliability are unmatched. What's more, there are a lot of cards for cross-system compatibility that weren't released in such a way that they could be used through some sort of external thing. Audinate's Dante card, for example, in 2016 does 256 simultaneous audio tracks. They don't do that pretty much anywhere else. So yeah, there's nothing superfluous about it.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
To me, this signals the change of thinking across the entire era. Back in the day, if you wanted the maximum performance, you had to get the maximum machine. I was shocked when at the WWDC this year, the brand new machine, the most powerful computer arguably that Apple has ever produced, it got less than 3 minutes of time on stage. And I think that's because these studios and the other things in the process now with the M series chips and all of Apple Silicon are so powerful and so able that needing to have the best machine in all use cases just really isn't a thing now. I think they can see that people will be buying the machines they need in niche areas to get their work done and not relying on one behemoth. Developers are the one thing where I think this is still critical because a lot of them use cards and things like that for particular I/O for specialized things. That'll remain, and the Mac Pro is there for those folks.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Jason kind of covered what I was going to say too. Is a lot of these professional audio packages, that's a combination of hardware and software, have been around for many years, and they're cross-platform. They have their own DSP cards that plug in, and they've all been written for those custom DSPs that they include with their hardware. So that's why, and they probably wouldn't be willing to rewrite all of their code to point it to the Apple hardware, Apple Silicon, to use to take advantage of the processors that are available in the M2 line, because it would limit their choices. They couldn't then, take that code and port it to the outside world.
Yeah, I think that the primary use for the PCIes in the new Macs are going to be I/O and storage. So I think those are the things that you're going to see the most of. You're not going to see processing cards because the reality is that these M series chips are so much faster than pretty much everything else, and the unified memory is a big deal. So the paths that run into the lanes inside of it are orders of magnitude faster than going through the board. And as a result, it doesn't matter if the processor itself is as fast. What really matters is it gets to that memory really, really, really quickly, and it allows it to do a much more efficient process. In addition to that, the CPU and the GPU are sharing a lot of those loads together. As the software continues to move forward, I think it's just from a cost perspective, you're going to have a hard time justifying it. You're going to be able to build a PC that's much more powerful than a Mac. Absolutely. So you're going to be able to spend $20,000, $30,000 on a PC, and it's going to be much more powerful than a Mac. Will you be able to build a PC that is competitive with a $12,000 Mac or under? Probably not. That's the issue, is that the efficiency that Apple's getting is going to make them very competitive at the 12,000 below. But if you want to put multiple NVIDIA cards in, if you want to do a lot of those specialty things, then you're still going to scale into a PC or Linux box. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and Paul says, "What do we know about the power supply on a tether for the Apple Vision Pro?"
Go ahead, Ryan.
Bit of a follow-up question I have to that are the two different approaches to powering this thing hot swappable, right? We know that you're either going to have the battery in your pocket or you're going to be connected directly to AC. Will you need to power down if you want to move from AC to your battery?
Go, Bill.
I think every gram was important on the headset. That's the one thing that we're hearing in terms of a negative, is that it's right on the edge of being a little uncomfortable for long wearing. Clearly, that little tethered brick power supply gives you, I think they say, a couple of hours when you're away from shore power. Most people using it where I expect most people to use it, which is at a desk of some sort in an environment, will undoubtedly keep it plugged in all the time and not have to worry about those. But I think grams mattered, and moving the power supply, even a modern lithium sorted battery or whatever the thing is, which are much lighter than the old ones, they just didn't want that on your face.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it wasn't mentioned anywhere, but I'm thinking they must have some degree of onboard battery as like a UPS, so that if your MagSafe gets knocked out, it'll keep going for 5 or 6 minutes or so until you get it plugged back in. It allows you to do battery swaps in the field. So I think they must have thought about something like that, because it is a proprietary connector. There probably won't be third party, and it's going to be a very small market. So it's going to, not too many third party developers are going to develop hardware interfaces for the battery power supply for this. I noticed that the cable on the battery looks like it may be removable, but it looks like it runs right into that battery. Maybe there's a hidden connector in there somewhere, but I'm sure it's a proprietary type of connector. So it's not going to be easy to interrupt that DC flow and add your own into the battery situation for the Vision. So I think it's going to take a number of years, and it's going to take some brave suppliers to manufacture something for such a narrow market device.
I don't think Apple's going to let anybody develop it. Like they're not a majority holder in the market. They're not in antitrust issues with it. There's no reason for them to allow most of those things to occur other than the software. I don't think they're going to be that interested in other people messing with their hardware. So I think that's most likely what's going to happen. They do have it. There was in an article somewhere, but there is a pluggable version of this. So if you're sitting at your desk, you can throw a plug onto it. I mean, there's a power supply or whatever that you can wire to it. I'm really interested to see if they have a smaller cord so that you can put it where I'm going to put it, which is on the headset. Like I'm just going to take that battery and attach it on the top of my head or put it in the back or whatever. I know that Apple didn't like the look, but I'm going to just put it there because I don't want it hanging down. So I'm hoping that there's a shorter cable so I don't have to wrap it up. But I think that, but I'm going to start doing a lot of neck exercises, the big neck machine, just kind of start working on it and have the 6 months. And so when my neck gets much thicker, and you'll know that I'm prepping for the headset to make sure that it just feels nice and light on my head. Next question.
David Brady, New York City. David says, I've been trying to spec out a Pelican or Portabrace case. What percentage of foam to gear is best?
Go, Jason.
Depends on what you're trying to protect. Also, the density is going to affect the longevity of the phone. Of the foam. PelicanFoam.com will actually cut these out for you custom. There are a lot of companies that'll do that, and many of them do great work.
Sorry, I got it, Mike. Bill?
If you can, if you're going with pick and pluck foam, here's my only rule. I try to get always 4 cubes and never go below that between any 2 pieces of gear. I know it seems like, gosh, if I just go down to 2 cubes, I can get more of my stuff in there. But every time I've gone below 3, 4 is for me ideal. But if I get down to 3, I'm cutting the amount of time that case is going to last before those walls start breaking into adjacent gear. So if you can get formed case inserts, do so. They will last the rest of your career. If you're going with foam, pick and pluck particularly, leave those walls as thick as you possibly can. It'll make the case last a lot longer.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. Pick and pluck is not the way to go. If especially if you have anything of any weight in there, and the amount, the spec for determining how much foam to put around stuff is based on what the object is that you're putting in there and the weight of it. If it's something light, then you can just use, a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch of foam to cushion it between the sides. If it's heavy, you may need, 1.5 inches or so. But find that there's companies out there that'll laser cut foam to your specifications, and they have pre-done templates for a variety of different types of hardware already in their library, and you can just order it up from them for specific Pelican type cases. So I would look into that, because the pick and pluck is the weakest point of the foam interface for Pelican cases because it tends to break down. And you remember, each little cube that's in there is only connected by a small layer of solid foam that goes between each cube so that you can pick it out easily. And that's the weakest point of that. And those eventually break down.
Yeah, I stick with the three rule generally. Once you go below 3, you're going to have trouble as far as the little squares. The place that I haven't used yet, but we saw them at NAB, and I just was really impressed, was mycasebuilder.com. So mycasebuilder.com not only has a ton of templates that already build them, but it has a designing software that you can just drag and drop. It has almost everything you could think about putting in. You can just drag and drop into the case, and it will let you design the foam that you want. So if you're going to do something that's temporary or something you're trying to still figure out, then the pick and pluck is fine. If you want to make it permanent, I would really look at mycasebuilder.com. I was really impressed with what I saw there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland. Dave says, Blackmagic switchers still insist on putting program audio on the aux video outputs. Any thoughts on why they insist on this, and he's got it in scare quotes, feature?
Go, Jason.
I thought the most recent switchers no longer did that. Am I completely backwards on that?
I don't know. I mean, most people still insist on using audio, doing audio in their ATEM switcher. I don't know I don't know how to use the audio in the smaller ATEM or any of the ATEM switchers. We insert. I guess what I would say is that we typically insert audio into it. If we're going to embed at the last minute into the switcher, then we sometimes with the larger switchers will do that. As far as outputting audio, I can't remember the last time. I mean, other than the program audio out, I can't think of anything else we've ever done. So I think that's the problem. I do think on the larger constellations you can use MADI now, so you can define some MADI outputs there. That's there, but audio has not been. We love Blackmagic. We use a lot of their hardware. Audio on the switcher is not something that is a popular solution. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. How valuable is a tally system for remote productions? How about for digital first productions? Or are comms sufficient for such events?
Javier?
I think that in any case, when you're doing live, it's very helpful and important to have a tally system that tells you that you are on air. For example, when we were doing the NAB, we sometimes had this delay. You can hear the show was going on, but you don't know if you are on air or you're about to get on air. So I think with a tally system, you can get rid of the whole, are we on? Okay, perfect. Okay, let's move. So I think since we have delay, a tally system was great because you can stop you from saying things on air that you shouldn't say.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, tally systems are important for two people. One is the camera operator and the other is the talent. So the talent needs to know where to look if they want to look out and address the audience directly. And if they don't have a floor manager that is pointing to their hot camera, it's over there. And the tally system can take care of that. And of course, the camera operators need to know when it's safe for them to reposition so that they don't do some kind of flying across the room move to reposition to a new person that starts to speak while they're live on the air. So that's two reasons the tally system is important.
Go, Bill.
Courtney just completely stole what I was going to say. As an occasional camera operator in my youth, you want to know when you're live and not make a move that even if you see something fabulous just a little bit to the left, you don't want to move if you're live.
Yeah, and return program is what we kind of back into, is just sending back a return program that people can see when you see when both images look the same, you're on air. So those are the things that's one possibility, but tally is pretty important otherwise. Just a quick reminder that you can ask more questions. You can ask questions all the way through the first hour. So if you've got questions right now, we've got an incredible panel here to answer them. And we have a great second hour on the WWDC wrap-up. So if there's specific things that you're thinking about that you want to get our opinions on, or things that we saw over the last week, both with the headset, but also with other initiatives that Apple's taking on, go ahead and throw those questions into Mokana. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland. Do the panelists think that this $400 US dollar webcam prompter combo justifies the extra cost versus a standard webcam for remote contributors, or has the pandemic made audience immune to eyeline issues? And he's got a link there to the prompter.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I think we just had a lengthy discussion on the audience not being immune to eyeline issues, so I think that remains important. The price here seems reasonable, but we can't say yet whether the camera has kind of the color and sharpness that we're gonna want. So that's the part that we'll need to test.
It looks pretty cool. That's all I have to say. Here's the problem really is that it is, I think, is it your own webcam or is it their webcam? I guess they have a webcam, right?
It is not your own webcam. And
Yeah,
that's probably
that's
the biggest drawback.
I think the biggest drawback is the quality of the video is going to be they're not going to, at $400, they're not going to knock it out of the park when it comes to video quality. And that's going to be the big problem. It doesn't matter if you have eyelines, if you have soft video. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it does a strange thing. It looks like what it does is it has its own video camera, and it has maybe a software app that uses your screen as its screen. So it uses a portion of your screen to put the other person's face in, leaving the rest of your screen open like this. It's interesting. You see that cable running up must be from its own video camera. And I'm not sure whether the video camera is behind the glass. Well, there actually is no glass there because it's not reflecting another screen. So I think the video camera may be sitting right on top of this little hood here. And it's just lowering your video camera down and limiting the person that you're looking to a portion of your screen. So it seems to be pricey for just doing that, for just basically a webcam that you can move down into the middle of the screen and software that can move your region of interest to just a portion of your computer screen.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting product, and I think that there's been a couple products like this over the last 15 years that we've seen go by. The big advantage, especially for folks that where it matters that they have eye contact, I think it actually puts them in a good position. I think the problem again is that you're giving up the quality of the video, so there's still a little bit of a trade-off. I do think that eye contact matters. So to get to the second part of your question, I don't think we're immune to it. I think that people put up with a lot of things, but I think that when you have good audio, good video, you have eye contact, I think that it does make a difference for the person on the other side. And sometimes I'll argue in the most powerful way, in the sense that they are not conscious that it matters, but it does, and so they're not noticing while they have eye contact, but they feel more connected. And I think that a lot of people who say a lot of these things don't matter are people who aren't paying attention to how people feel when they talk. Very, very subtle stuff. And if you're a salesperson, or you're trying to move up the corporate ladder, or you're trying to sell an idea, that eye contact makes a difference. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Brian Shand in Sydney, Australia. What components would a run-and-gun HDR live stream setup look like?
Well, we did that at both NAB, and then we refined it a bit for Cinegear, and we'll do it again at SIGGRAPH, and we're going to do a test on June 18th at a soccer game. And so what we're doing right now for run and gun, I don't know if I can grab the image fast enough to show it to you, but the one of the things that we use there is, it's a camera that can do a LUT. So we want to do some kind of PQ LUT or HLG LUT that comes out. And what we're doing is transmitting that. It needs to be 10-bit. So you need a 10-bit output. And when you get that 10-bit output, we're using it. There's a variety of TerraDeck products that allow us to sever the connection to the live view. And then the live view is capable. The live view LU800 is capable of a 10-bit output. So as far as that run and gun, I'm assuming run and gun is kind of mobile, like what we did at Cinegear. So that's going to give us that 10-bit output, and then we're going to be able to get that back to us, and then be able to encode it. We still need to maintain that 10-bit PQ setting, and then or curve or HLG curve. Then we send it to YouTube, and we're off to the races. So that's the basic piece. There are other ways to back it up if if you've got the cables to do it, if you're able to connect to the internet, Marcelo here is from Stream Voodoo, and Stream Voodoo is I think getting close to being able to do a lot of those things as well. There's a couple other ways you can, if you have internet again, you can do things like if you have bonded internet, you could even use something like an elemental link. UHD has 10 bits, so if you had the internet connection, you can simply plumb it right into there if you're not trying to do multiple cameras or do other things like that. The nice thing about the live view, which we use heavily, is that it just works. You just turn it on, you turn it on, and there's video on the other end, and it just works every time. And so that's the thing that we lean towards pretty often. Go ahead, Courtney.
I was going to ask Alex. He did do an HDR test, I think, at
we did,
where we stood in front of this giant wall of LEDs that could go to nuclear burn your eyes out level behind us.
When they turn on, you literally can feel the heat. It's like,
yeah, I was standing as a test. I was, Flolic and I were standing directly in front of it. It's like,
cream source. Yeah.
It warms your back up. But did you record that test, Alex? And did you look at it later?
We did. There was, I think we were using a new camera, and it was I think that there was some LUT issues that we had with the camera, so the ending product looked a little bright. I think that what happened is that the camera LUT, the Canon camera LUT for the R8, is not a true PQ. So it says PQ, but it's trying to be a little bit more normal. Like it's trying to be a little bit between HLG and PQ. I think it's their own mix of that. And the result is that when we convert it straight on, we ended up with a very bright image that was oversaturated, and so we it's not public, but we learned a lot from that experiment, and so we're now tuning for. We've got the next test is June 18th. We're going to do a soccer game. If anyone's interested in joining us, it's going to be in San Francisco, and we're going to be doing a soccer game on June 18th, and we're going to do just a portion before the show. We're going to do an HDR, so we'll see how that looks. Go ahead, Marcel.
Yeah, I was thinking about being in run and gun outside. An ND filter will also be needed, of course, I guess, for the lights.
Yep, I have the one that I used on my camera is a 3-stop ND filter on the front end of that, and that just gets you back into a range where you can start to open it up. The reality is that at Cinegear outside, I could have done a 9-stop, and I have a little bit of there are adjustable ones where you can have 3 to 9 stops in it, and you just turn it to get a darker piece. I think it affects the skin. So the way that polarization works, so I tend to get fixed ND filters. Next question.
David Brady's up next from New York City. David says, while the OWC Thunderbolt Go is a killer at the office, I still need more USB I/O, both A and C. What kind of expansion options should I be looking at?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I went with their big brother to the Go, which is this dock. It has tons of I/O. It's based on the Thunderbolt ports with the USB-C form factor, and that means you can use any of these little dongles to switch any of those that you want to switch from the Thunderbolt port to a standard USB-A port if you just have a bunch of things. Or this usually has enough power, and particularly the dock on the front, the little USB-A dock on the front, you could tap out to an extension and you'd probably good. OWC just makes really solid stuff that it's hard to fault.
Yeah, and the other thing to look at is you have different lanes. So if depending on what computer you have, if you have a MacBook Pro, you've got 2 lanes. You got to make sure that you're pairing those lanes up, but you can theoretically use multiple docks. You just don't want to put both docks. And this is where people get in trouble. I think this is most of the problems that we've had with hubs. We were really talking about this the other day, is when people they don't know it, but they're putting a dock into one lane, and then they're putting other devices into another input on the Mac that is on the same lane as the dock is, and it's cutting up what the dock is going through. So you have to know which connectors. So like with my MacBook Studio or my Mac Studio, I have 4 lanes on the back. With my MacBook, or not my MacBook, my Mac Mini that I have 1 lane, I believe, for those. And so you have to be kind of careful of for the base one. For the Mac Mini Pro, you have the multiple, the 4 lanes. So you'd be very careful of knowing where those lanes belong. And now that I think of it, I think my Mac Studio is actually 2 lanes for 4 inputs. And so you have to be careful of not overdriving those lanes. But you can theoretically put a couple docks on it. Go ahead, Marcelo.
Yeah, and the thing about the USB hubs, I do have a couple of them here, but they have to be AC powered. So you don't have to rely only on the power that the USB port will give you. Even on the Mac Studio, I do try that. And, if you have several USBs connected to it, it will be complicated to run them without extra power.
The one that I just got that is not going to be the solution you're looking for, but one that I'm about to test is this. This is the Uni hub. I'm testing this one with my. This is based on some of the tests we've been doing. I got this to test with my iPad. I was trying to do it before the show, but I was up late last night getting a deadline done. So anyway, this is. But what this has that I'm interested in, it's got Ethernet. It's got HDMI out, and then it's got USB, of course, USB-C's in. And the reason that I'm interested in this one specifically is I'm looking at the idea that I can take video in via an ATEM or whatever, but push video out as well. I want to see if I can go both ways. So we'll talk about this next week if it works. We'll talk about it either way next week, but we'll talk about whether it worked or not. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Up next, will we ever create interesting live looks in Zoom meetings like those that have worked in film? Could performance art be done over Zoom? Example, a film shot looking at the side of heads and things like that.
Go ahead, Javier.
I'm sure that every time you give a person like a blank sheet of paper or a piece of wood or anything they can express themselves, they're going to do it eventually. We're going to choose different backgrounds or where to place the camera or what light. I think this show is a good example of people choosing what to put behind their camera, what lighting, what angle they're shooting. I mean, we are going for intelligibility and looking good and being framed, but we are consistently trying to get better looks. So I think you can, someone that wants to express something more dramatic or want to do a different artistic choice, or do a different way of placing the camera or back lighting and everything. So I think Zoom looks and the remote looks are gonna keep changing and refined for the different uses. And of course, you can perform. There's nothing stopping you from having like a show or a play in Zoom with different actors, looking and turning the cameras on and off. You can do it. Technically, you can do it, and it's only a matter of when someone's going to try and do something interesting.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, when you think that Zoom is really a communications program or platform, it's designed for communicating between you and somebody else. Generally, the dramatic type framing, like the one they're talking about, is the telephoto profile, something like that. I won't leave it up for very long because I don't want to get a takedown. That's used all the time in motion pictures, obviously, and television shows, when that character that's on cameras is talking to, reacting with another person who is off camera, off to the right of them, let's say in that picture that I just showed. So, you can do a dramatic performance or play out a dramatic performance on Zoom, but usually Zoom is used in another fashion, which is for communicating two-way. And in that case, if I'm looking over at my second monitor while I'm talking to you, it's kind of disconcerting because you're looking at the side of my head and it's less personal and it looks like I'm distracted, which I kind of hate that profile shot. You'll see it a lot of times in commercials where they shoot a second camera. They're shooting with a teleprompter, so there's in the lens communication that happens at the beginning of the commercial. And then they'll cut to the B camera, which is on a profile shot, and it takes me kind of out of that communication because it looks like then you're kind of eavesdropping over the person that's talking to the camera.
Yeah, and I do think that there are some people that have done some theater, and I think that as the video quality gets better in Zoom, you may see people pushing that a little bit more as far as trying to really create live, theater, essentially. Obviously, the folks that work on the broadcast tools in Zoom know a lot about theater and know a lot about this kind of thing. So I think that it's definitely something they're conscious to. But I do think it's going to be a little while before we get that. Next question.
Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland's up next. Has anyone had success getting the LED metering on Skaarhoj fader panels working with vMix? Seems very, very laggy.
Yeah, getting something out of software into hardware and having it actually be synced up, it's a really hard problem. So I think that the chances of getting it to work well is low, just because of the vagaries of trying to put that together. So I think that I don't know what very, very laggy looks like, but I would expect a half a second, a quarter second to half a second, which would make it to me useless. So I would keep it. I probably would not try to do hardware metering on a software device in there. I just think the inherent lag is gonna be there. I don't know how you would get over that. Next question.
Joe Kidd in the Bay Area in California says, I'd like to experiment creating 8K VR 180 content. What is a good first step hardware solution that meets these parameters, costing less than a Canon EOS R5 plus a Canon RF 5.2mm f2.8L dual fisheye lens? Thanks.
Nothing is going to give you that. I mean, if you're trying to do stereo VR 180, if you want to experiment with other things, I mean, I was just looking at that Canon yesterday, and so that is the real one that a lot of people are using. It's full frame sensor. Now you can, if you want to go to a single frame, you can use if you have a full frame sensor, you can take a 180 lens. There's a I think it's an 8mm or 6mm or something like that Canon lens that potentially can get you. You just need to get that whole sphere, onto the sensor. So if you're seeing that whole sphere, it can be unwrapped into 180. So it's just a matter of whether and then there's cases where you could cut that off, especially if you're using Super 35. But I would say that a dual fisheye, there aren't that many options. There's a couple older options, but they're not going to be great. Now there are a variety. There's I think it's Can-Do makes ones, as well as Ecamm has a bunch of solutions that you potentially could use, but I don't think they're any less expensive. The Canon is a pretty efficient cost, but look at Can-Do and then of course Insta360 has tools that will do that if you're trying to start, but it's not going to be. I think Insta360 has I think they actually may make a. I think they used to make one that was dual eye that would flip. It'll flip closed and it'll give you 360, and it'll flip open and give you dual eye. So I think that those are that might be a less expensive way to start to experiment with it. I do think I applaud the direction that you're going. I think it's going to be important for us to start thinking about 3D. There are going to be, while it may seem like a niche market, there's a lot of people that have a lot of money that are going to be buying headsets in early next year. Because it's expensive. So it doesn't matter whether there's a lot of them or not. They're going to be willing to buy just about anything that looks remotely interesting because they're trying to figure out how the headset works. And I mean, we've seen this surge with products before where you're just in the right place at the right time. And the problem with 180 is that you really have to do a lot of it to understand how it works and what works in that environment. I will save you some time that your sweet spot is between 5 feet and 15 feet. That's where you want most of your action to happen. That's where you're going to see parallax. That's where you're going to see pieces. That's what it's going to look good. You're not going to want to probably move the camera very much. That makes people sick. So, think about fixed cameras that are at that, that are in a pretty close environment. You're going to get that. Now, as people move away, having something that's adjustable is nice. We've done ones where we've done really, really wide shots where the cameras themselves are a couple feet apart because we're forcing a stereo projection. So there's a lot of different ways that you can cut it, but getting a lot of practice is the first step. So you're going the right direction. Marcelo?
Yeah, talking about practice, Insta360 X3, right? Very good, and it has 180 modes, and you can try it. Of course, it's not going to be 8K, but in the 180 mode, it's very...
Don't they have a stereo one that I believe that they used to make one. I just don't know if they still make it. There's one that would spin. Now the other thing to know is that the Sphere, the Insta360 Sphere, is another camera that will get you stereo. So it will So it, or maybe that's not, that's the one. Insta360 Sphere is for a camera, but Insta360 makes a globe version of this that we've seen, and it will get you the stereo that you're looking for, the Pro 2. And I don't know if it's more expensive or less expensive than buying all the I think it might be. We've used these in productions, but I didn't have to. Yeah, it's less. It's $5,000, which is less than the package that you just laid out, and it will do 360 and also stereo. So it's another one, and 180 stereo as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, could you see healthcare applications for the VisionPro, particularly in stress and or pain management, for example, or would a traditional VR headset like the MetaQuest be better for those use cases?
Go ahead, Bill.
I was reading this morning, and actually one of the articles I read, there was a reviewer who was at the opening, and she was out of Australia, and she specifically mentioned that part of the demo that she saw when she got to put it on and try VisionPro was kind of a version of the Calm app that Apple has. It was a 3D VR immersive relaxation app. She was very positive about what happened. Now, on the other side of that, spending $3,500 plus whatever lenses or whatever you have to add to it just to get a relaxation app is a pretty high-end solution. But Apple is thinking of that. Apple has gone, as we all know, particularly with the watches and things like that, into health type apps. And so I think this will be one thing if you can afford the platform.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, it's going to have to come with an app to relieve the stress of having paid $3,500 for the device itself. But in all reality, though, I do see a market for professional use. For example, doctors could use it and maybe it'd take a lot of work, but to superimpose a MRI image over the body of a person who's standing in front of you and being able to take the output of that to a monitor that they could look at. To show them where the source of their problem is, where their pain is coming from, or superimpose where their pain is over a CAT scan or an MRI to show them, how the pain is emanating from a certain spot in the body. I can see a vertical market application for that, a professional market application, but as a consumer device, there have been so many gimmicks over the years, the glasses with the LEDs that face in and flash at certain frequencies. There's been all kinds of crazy, quacky-oriented devices for doing that, and I'm sure there'll be developers that might come up with something like this for the Vision, if there's a big enough market for it.
Yeah, it's funny. I did the math on my Apple IIe. I think I posted it on Twitter, but I did the math on my Apple IIe. It was $2,000 in 1982, which is considerably more than the headset. $5,200, I think, now in today's money. So I think that when we say it's expensive, it just depends on how people use it. My Apple IIe was not nearly as useful as the headset. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, inflation does weird things to prices and stuff. You're right. There's a couple of pundits that I listen to all the time, and I was expecting them to absolutely, just lambast the headset. But they were both spoke very favorable of it. They even said that Apple may as well be shipping $100 bills with the thing because their estimation is that they couldn't even make it for $3,500, let alone ship it for $3,500. I was talking, John and I were talking the other day, and he said after the announcement, he said that the resolution in it is not enough. John, correct me if I'm wrong, that your brother said that it's not enough to look at x-rays. Is that what you said? Or was it CAT scans?
No, they're using 2K per screen right now to read x-rays. So it is high enough.
Oh, I could have sworn you said your brother said it wasn't good enough to look at x-rays. Anyway.
Javier?
And that we are talking about healthcare, I was wondering, since they announced it, I wondered this. I think Tim Cook's been working around how can they measure blood pressure and blood sugar. And I'm pretty sure that you can do blood pressure very easily by the eyes. And I'm pretty sure you can actually do blood sugar by the oxygen in your eyes. So, and maybe not for this device, you're not going to buy this just for that. But if they scale it down, it could be like the Tim Cook moment of I solved this for the entire market.
Next question.
Next question comes from Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland. And Greg says, Dave, I'm sorry, says, can the panel recommend an inline USB audio interface to use with a Rode NTH-100 headset that ends with a TRRS 3.5 millimeter plug? Usage is for Zoom and or Teams, not broadcast.
Yeah, there's a couple different ones that we've used in the past. I think that the highest quality one is made by Audio Technica, and I'm typing really fast because I can't remember the name of it. But Audio Technica makes one that we kind of ended up, starting to use. And the big thing that it did was that it handles TRS and TRRS correctly. And it's interface. Let's see if I can get this really quickly. The one that we started using was the Amazon. It's the ATR2X USB 3.55. And it's made by Audio Technica. And again, the big advantage that we found with it is that it was capable of correctly going back and forth. We've had some USB that either don't have enough gain or mishandle TRRS. If you give them TRS, they're fine. If they give them TRRS, they're not, or vice versa. So I would look at it's the Audio Technica ATR2X. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, as a project manager or leader, have you ever dealt with projects that have so many issues that it's not worth continuing with the project, but management doesn't see the project the same way?
All the time. So there's like, welcome to corporate production. Yeah. So I think that a lot of these can be a lot of events can become problematic. Your job is to find the best outcome for those. They may not be perfect. They may not be exactly what you knew that they could have done or what could have been done. The key is to have it. A lot of times you being close to it will think that it's a complete disaster. The consumer doesn't notice, the client doesn't notice, and your job is to not just throw up your hands and give up, but just to keep on focusing on what you can do to make it a great event, and know that you're seeing it through it. I have to do this all the time. Know that I'm seeing it through a lens that the client's not seeing through, and then what you do is you write down a bunch of things on how to not do that again. But a lot of times, if it's really catastrophic, there's been probably 4 or 5 times out of over 2,000 events that I've sent an email to a client 2 weeks before and said, we should cancel this event. Like, you should just, like, you don't have to pay me, like, just don't do the event. Like, and those have been, I'm running out of runway, and I just know that there's no way with the changes that they've made. Now, usually what that does is it precipitates a bunch of meetings, and we've never actually canceled the event. So we've canceled it like once, but usually it precipitates a bunch of meetings like, hey, we got to come to, we have to have a conversation, or we have to stop doing this, or we have to turn a right angle. But it's very rare for us to do that. But I've done it a couple times, and it's been effective. I've done a couple events that I should have done that, and it wasn't effective. And there's nothing like a live event going sideways is like cutting your arm off with a butter knife. So.
At what level, Alex? Like, what size event are you talking about?
Pretty big events.
Wow.
So
is it like a strategy? Like you're saying, like, look,
it's not. It's literally
so bad. We have to just.
We either have to change. We either have to make a course correction or cancel it. And we've made the course corrections to do it. But you have to be. But I was willing to just walk away, because, one of my primary sales, one of my primary value adds is that we don't fail very often or at all. And so if I think that I'm actually going to hit the ground, I'll usually come to a client. I'll either try to make a course correction or I'll try to get out of it, out of the project, because I don't want to. It's like a prosecutor won't prosecute hard cases because they don't want to affect their effectiveness rating, their win rate. And so if I think that I'm really not going to make the turn, sometimes I'll. Now I've been in events where 2 minutes before the event, I wasn't sure if I was going to make the turn. Like, it was enough things had gone wrong in the last hour that I was like, we had, I talked about it yesterday. We had one where things caught fire, things were on fire, things were, doing all kinds of things. There was rain, wind, all at the same time. And we just were like, I don't know if it's going to work, but and sometimes we started a couple minutes late. Sometimes, we lost a whole broadcast truck an hour and a half before an event, so we've had things happen. But you do keep track of that. That's all. I mean, and they leave scars. Go ahead, Ryan.
A wise colleague once shared with me that your key responsibility as a project manager is to make sure bad news travels fast.
Go ahead, Jason.
I love that. I feel like there's this tendency, especially when you become a professional and start calling yourself an expert, that if you put your entire heart into something and it fails, that you're not good enough. And children do this all the time. In fact, that's how they exist.
We just have to remember that failure can affect people's career trajectory on the stuff that I do, and it can affect stock market prices and so on and so forth. So we're very conscious that failure is in small amounts. You'll see me. I have a high willingness to fail when I'm not getting paid for it. I have a very low tolerance for failure when I'm getting paid for it.
Well, and that was the second part of what I was going to say. A lot of this can be fixed with proper communication, and yes, a shot across the bow will almost always fix this.
Sometimes, if you do it too often, then everyone ignores you, and you're seen as a Eeyore, and then they don't hire you next time. So we try to paper over as much as we possibly can. Live is so dangerous that if anyone really knew what was happening on the back end, they wouldn't do any of them. And so we try to kind of protect the client from that. Go ahead, Bill. Real quick.
I've had a few of those, but I've also had one where a client got to about 75% and said, I think we're going to pull the plug on this. Go ahead and bill us for the whole thing. I thought, that is a client that I'm going to work incredibly hard to keep.
I got my first two elemental encoders, $33,000 worth of encoders on a cancellation fee that I didn't even ask for. They just said, we feel really bad. We'll just give it back to you. And, it just came apart. And I was like, okay, well, here we go.
That's why building these relationships is so important. If they truly believe in you and you can produce for them over and over again, you will get a lot of slack in some of these areas.
Well, the funny thing is that when it comes to a client, they may have seen inefficient by that client, but they had our undivided attention after that. Like, it was like, this is a client that we want to keep forever, and so that it was a good business move on their end. Next question, real quick.
Robert Linkroom in Belmont Shores, California. Does anyone know whatever happened to Dorrough? I have not been able to purchase the new 40 series Dorrough meter, which is about $500 US. They are occasionally available on the used market, but the current vintage units are snapped up fast and priced high.
Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, they disappeared because they're stuck with a finite metering. The legend determines is printed on the face of them. So they're not very versatile, and they were used in radio stations and on mixing panels and mixing stage rooms. You can be seen from across the room. But LCD-based and small system-on-a-chip type-based meters are now much more versatile and can have different scales and different types of readouts that are much more versatile than these fixed analog devices that use discrete LEDs and discrete markings on the panel.
But they look so pretty. Next question.
Courtney's got those beautiful ones. Or not Courtney. Who was it?
Mitchell.
Mitch.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. What are the benefits of a 4K signal over HDMI? Wouldn't SDI be a better option? What was Roland thinking? And he's got a link to B&H for it.
I think that a lot of they looked at the use case of a lot of people that are going to generate 4K are going to generate from consumer devices, whether it's a computer or an Apple TV or a camera that has an output, and they just didn't think that the market that they're aiming this at was going to be able to generate a 12G signal, and they definitely didn't want to do 3G signals or 3G signals, and so I think that was their decision. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Fenwick in Emeryville, California, here on the panel. Has anyone used the latest update to Teams? It looks really nice with a few shortcomings.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I had to use it the other day, and I was kind of shocked by it. It looks really clean. The big problem is your face is always tiny in the corner, and I have bad news to mention to you guys, but when I'm on Zoom, I'm usually looking at me. I don't know what that's about. So that was awkward. It also feels like you're driving like a really pretty, VW instead of like a Ferrari, because we still don't have any of the controls, but it really looks nice. Anybody seen it?
Ryan?
Chris, are you referring to the Windows native version?
Oh, I wouldn't touch a Windows machine.
Okay. I mean, that's the one that's been recently rebuilt.
Well, the Mac one looks a lot different than it did a couple of months ago.
How's the 1080p after two people?
There's no 1080p. Everything's 640 by 360. I got a call today. I'm supposed to have a live edit session with some people today, and they said, "Can we should we use Zoom or should we use Teams? I said, Zoom. It's 3 times the resolution. Of course.
Yeah. It's. I mean, it's fine for corporate. It's fine for corporate communication, just like Word is fine for corporate communication. It's just not, if you want something that is high quality, you don't use either of those. Next question.
David Barton in Memphis, Tennessee says, our company is threatening to move away from Zoom and use Teams exclusively. We'd like to avoid that dumpster fire. Has anyone had success convincing their management to keep Zoom? Please don't make us use purple Skype.
I think that the main issue is with Teams is just low resolution. Like for me, like I can't go back to 720. It's like, and so, I think that for the penny pinchers in the in the system that are trying to just so the problem really is that Windows is the most successful in places that have a lot of vertical integration. So the IT wants it just to do what they want it to do, and the folks that are running the books wanted to just do the thing that they wanted to do. And so that's where you see a lot of Teams and where you see Microsoft in general. But they just oftentimes just don't care about that final bit. And so you just have to, I don't know whether, it depends on the company you're in, whether you can make that turn, but it's never going to be competitive. Let's be clear, if you look at the trajectory of Skype, Microsoft is never going to turn this around. It's never going to be a great product. They took the state-of-the-art industry leader by a long shot and drove it into the ground. It is the most, in our world, it is the most amazing failure in the history of video production, is to take the product that was 10 years in front of everybody else and then just plow it into the ground, and to a point where people like me who had spent tens of thousands of dollars on Skype integration would never open up Skype again. I won't even join an event. I had an event that they said, oh, we have to use Skype. And I'm like, how about we use Zoom? Because if we're not, I'm not going to speak. I'm done. I'm so angry with that product. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. What's really interesting, and I go back to this, and you've heard me say this a million times, Alex, is that, we as a society, as, mankind, used VHS for nearly 30 years. And I'll tell you that the average person, they don't care about video resolution. We like to say that they do, but they can't.
They don't care, but they feel it. That's the thing.
We think so, and yet, our biggest client is cutting off Zoom soon. Can't use Zoom. And here's what's interesting: the draw to Teams, the main feature that they're being drawn to by Teams, is the ability to share documents easier.
Oh yeah,
and I know that you can share things in Zoom, but the perception is that you can't. And I say this to our friends at Zoom: you have to look at all the reasons why, and sometimes the resolution and all that just isn't enough. It's just not. It's just
done by left brain thinking. People are thinking about it, not looking at what they feel, and that is a big, And the thing is that, and you watch, Apple will sell in the next 3 years more headsets at 10 times the price than Oculus. And the reason they're going to do that is because Apple pays attention to how people feel, and the thing, and so it is, that feel is super important in the process. All these companies can't figure out how Apple we're kind of transitioning to our second hour, but all these companies can't figure out how Apple keeps on wrapping around them, doing something that's more expensive that they were doing, and then cleans their clock. And the reason is because Apple is paying attention to those small details. They're paying attention to how people feel, even if they don't notice it. And because Apple pays attention to the weird little edges and all the little buttons and all the little things, and they think about this all the time, and they think about the, surprise and delight moments, and how do you have this? I mean, all the way down, when you open up the packaging on Apple, you're like, how many meetings did it take?
Disagree.
To do that? But I'm just saying that you always want to pay attention to that as an individual. I know companies that, anyway, so.
But the people who are making these decisions don't care about that.
I understand that. They're just not very smart.
They're ruining. They're still,
and they can't figure out why people
that affect us.
I get it, but they are not. and then they can't figure out why people don't want to come back to the office, because they're making a whole bunch of decisions in the office, the open office, things. They can't understand why people don't want to come back, and it's because these are the things that they're not thinking about, and I love competing against people who don't see that, because, clean their clocks. So I don't think you want to, as someone who's in those companies, just put up with it, but know that, when you can, if you can, it gives you a competitive advantage to have so many people so short-sighted. So don't worry about it too much. Just know that that's your edge. All right. We are now jumping into the second hour and talking about WWDC. We've had a week. There has been a lot of announcements, not just the headset, although we probably will talk a lot about the headset because that was the big announcement. But there was computers, and there's new architectures, and there's new, all kinds of things that Apple has released. This is the big time when we see what Apple is going to roll out for us for the next year from a software perspective, and giving developers all the things they need to do that. And we are fortunate to have my good friend Rene Ritchie for the second hour. So Rene has been kind enough to join us. I know that Rene's very busy, so we're really, really glad to have Rene here. Rene, it's so good to have you here. Oh, can't hear you, Rene. You might make.
I'm such an amateur. I was just saying I've missed you so much, your glorious, beautiful face on conversations like this.
So we're going to kick it off with your feedback. You've got plenty of time here, but what were the things that you saw that are the most important things for us to be tracking from WWDC?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what I just heard you talking about, and that is Apple has this ability to package technology. They're not first to market. They famously waited 10 years on smartphones from like the Treo period and the BlackBerry period. They weren't first with tablets. There was a whole decade of a tablet PC. Even watches, there was the Pebble and other watches. And arguably they entered that very early. And now we've had everything from the Oculus Rift to the Quest to like the Index to like so many things. And we're seeing Apple's vision for what they're calling spatial computing, but it's really like this mixed reality, AR, VR. And I was blown away. Like my expectations were high. And because you just know how Apple rolls, but the way that the things they chose to focus on are always fascinating. Like the original iPhone didn't have apps. It didn't have multimedia messaging. It didn't have so many things, but it made you want to go and show everybody, look, I can pinch to zoom. I can look at this. It's like elastic, scrolling. And this feels the same way to me. It's like, it doesn't have every feature. There are obviously huge app gaps, a monumental gaming gap, because unlike Netflix and Disney Plus, they just won't put the big gaming streaming and stores and services on there. But it looks so delightful. Like in every experience, from opening that thing up to putting it on to moving in and out of the virtual worlds, it just looks transformative.
And both of us have a bunch of friends that were at the event putting the headset on, and so there was a lot of text flying back and forth. So how was it?
Yes.
Look.
Yeah. And they all said it was better than they expected.
Yeah. There was nobody that said, "Oh, it wasn't very good." There was a couple people that said it was a little heavy, on their face. Some of the women that I reached out to had, it was a little like, "Oh, it's a little heavy." The men were mostly like, "It's right on the edge of being too heavy." It's one of those things. What did you talk to? I'm sure that you. We're trading notes with folks quietly.
Yeah. And even like the grumpy ones were like, Apple, like eye tracking, because there's a lot of things that have been problematic just from a pure technology delivery point of view. Yeah. And it's been things that induce vertigo or things that mess with your perspective. And it just sounds like they nailed the eye tracking so well. Like people couldn't believe it. And the silicon, they are so far ahead, and we've talked about this for years. They are so far ahead in being able to make custom silicon. Like the R1, the new chip that they introduced, is a real-time engine, and we know that they've taken people from QNX, which is QNX makes, if you're not familiar with them, they make the real-time operating systems that are in submarines and infotainment systems and nuclear power plants, things that. It doesn't matter how fast they go; they just have to go on every single beat and never miss one. And when you think about it, like an immersive headset, it can't crash because an app hangs. It can't crash because FaceTime is not working, or because you're getting too many tabs in Safari. So you have this whole M2 processor handling all the Mac-y Mac, the application layer stuff. But then this real-time operating system that's just flooding that image pipe with keeping the world alive around you. And I think that's the secret, is they managed to get that sensor fusion hub and that image pipeline into real time and just such low latency that you start to buy into that illusion.
I mean, everybody that I talked to was like, Well, it was really, really amazing. It was way better than I expected, but it's still too much money.
Yes.
And I was like, maybe you can't do the amazing without spending too much money. Like that might be
what would you
like,
take off, right? Like it's like $500 for this camera. You want to lose the cameras on the bottom. You want to lose like what part are you going to take away?
Exactly. What else did you see there, or on the releases beyond the headset itself? We had some new Macs. We had a lot of widgets.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious for your hot take on the Mac Pro, because the whole selling point of the Mac Pro is really fast PCIe connectivity. But Apple really showed like audio and video cards, which is great for like anybody in the industry. Like you put an SDI card in there, you put a RAID, like whatever you want for storage, all of that. But like some people still want their big CUDA cores. Some people still want their big AMD cards. And some people want like other stuff.
I fundamentally think that Apple is seeding the high end. I think that's what they did for the Mac Pro, the Intel Mac Pro. Is we're going to give you a $50,000 or $60,000 box that can just go into the into the atmosphere. And I think that they found that there just there wasn't anybody there buying those. Like there's a handful of people. I know people who bought those, and they're really happy with them. But they're doing very, very vertical things that I just think Apple made the decision. I don't have any information, but I believe that Apple just made the decision that market isn't worth having, that they're more consumer driven. We do have AV professionals that need things like I/O. So there's all of us that are doing all this crazy stuff with Sonnet boxes, with our studios and everything else. So we need a Mac Pro. The cap on the Mac Pro now, without any cards in it, is $11,700. So just under $12,000 that's there. And I think that Apple decided this is the world we're going to own. Like everything from, we're going to give you a cost-effective solution for AV professionals from $12,000 down. And I think that again, at any price point that you see from $599 to $12,000.
Yeah.
Speccing out a PC that does the same thing that computer does, you can definitely build PCs that do that, but speccing out the same one. I mean, there's a reason when we talk to folks about building stuff on the Mac, like my Zoom ISO is only on the Mac because you can't build a PC for $600 that can do what the Mac Mini can do. And I think you're going to see Apple continue to fuse that and just say, this is a market that, we're going to really make it difficult to have a cost-effective solution. And then we're going to let companies let you put 4 NVIDIA cards into a PC, let you, put 1.5 terabytes of memory into that PC. You're going to let you do all that stuff because that's like 10 people. Like, and it's just not, it was in some ways the Intel Mac was not, it was not Apple-y. I do miss the free space heater that came with all of those, especially on the cold winter days in Canada. Yeah.
Like I would just hold my hands over it and I'd keep toasty warm. But to your point, like there are things, because it has these massive pools of unified memory, and we have even more of that on the M2 Ultra now than ever before. You can literally load things into memory that just don't work on other systems, and you can do and because of the neural engines, and now you have double those next generation neural engines. Even like with the original M1 Ultra, I was beating a 4090 in things like Topaz video AI and Topaz photo AI, and not by a lot, but I was still beating a card the size of the Avengers helicarrier with this little aluminum box that didn't get very loud at all on my desk. I think that niceness factor is hard to quantify.
Yeah. And I think they need that Mac Pro. I mean, I think they need to have those things available. But I think that it's I/O and storage are the two big things that those PCI cards are going to give us. And I don't think that they obviously, Apple's not really interested in the GPU market, for that kind of thing. And if you want that, then there's, but I think that, again, there's some processing that'll do a lot better just because of the unified RAM. Just the speed of access to that RAM is a big deal. And the fact that the CPU and the GPU can share it is it's big. And if other panelists have any input, go ahead and raise your hand into the panel discussion. But otherwise, Rene and I are going to talk a little bit longer.
Can I add one other point here that really impresses me is that what we saw at WWDC was based on the M2 generation architecture, and TSMC was unable to provide a process shrink for that. It's they give it a new name. Like we had N4, N5, N5P, N4, N4P. So, but this is really like 4th or 5th generation of that 5 nanometer process. They weren't able to ship 3 nanometer on time. But when you look at these products, like you look at what they put in this generation of MacBook Pro, Mac Studio, and even the Apple Vision, they're going to go to 3 nanometers, even 2 nanometers really soon. So the next generation after this, if you imagine everything in that headset with a processor that has way more transistors, is smaller, cooler, and can run faster. Like this is it sounds cliche, but this is the worst this stuff is ever going to be.
Yeah, and I think that in addition to that, I think a lot of the creature comforts. I mean, we've been looking a lot at the widgets and some of the automation, and Apple is just continuing. It's interesting that they're spending so much energy on it. On a lot of the shortcuts and we just had a whole discussion with the Zoom team yesterday about adding shortcuts to Zoom, but a lot of that has to do with the new architecture that Apple's building to make that possible. So it does seem like a lot of those things are moving forward faster than I expected, to be honest. I thought they just kind of put them out there and be like, okay, here we're done.
Well, and if we've talked about, we see so much come together. Like we've been talking about spatial AR, like audio AR with the AirPods for a long time. And we've seen that roll out with spatial audio, but even things like Final Cut just came to the iPad, and it seems like Apple Vision can run iPad apps even better. And Matty Hapoya was talking about Final Cut is going to ship with the Apple Vision headset, and you'll be able to sit there and either pull it up from your Mac or run the iPad version natively with however many windows in whatever space you want them to be in. And I'm sure Resolve is going to be right, because their Apple's Pro Workflows team works with Adobe and with Resolve all the time. I'm sure they're going to be in lockstep with that. And we're going to enter this world, Alex. We put our Rumsleg helmet on, and then suddenly our entire editing suite is around us.
I really do want the helmet. A couple of us were going back and forth. I just want a whole helmet. I was like, just give me just drop the whole helmet down on. I think while we're there, give me a little AC unit, a little purifier, big headphones. I'm happy. I feel like once I put the headset on, I might as well just drop a Boba Fett, helmet down and just go, this is the way. Yeah. So anyway, Ryan, go ahead.
Pertinent to the design of the Vision Pro, Rene, were you at all surprised by the open ear concept versus them doing more of an integration with AirPods Pro or something over the ear?
Yeah, I think they wanted to be able to create a bigger soundstage than just what AirPods Pro are fantastic, but they didn't want something as heavy as the Max, the AirPods Max, because that would have added considerable more aluminum and weight to the unit, and they didn't want something as small as the AirPods, because the AirPods are kind of firing in while the Macs are sort of firing out. And I think this gave them the ability to do that projected soundstage, because apparently it's even next generation to the current AirPod technology, where it's doing ray tracing and a whole bunch of other things to make it sound even better. And then if you're on an airplane, I'm sure Alex will be within 3 minutes of getting a headset, you put the AirPods Pro in. So they wanted to leave it so that you wouldn't have to modify anything, and you could just stick your AirPods Pro in if you wanted to.
And do we think if you're in a home or an office setting and there are people in your immediate proximity that they're going to be hearing this in a faint way, that they're going to be hearing it loud and clear? Or do we not have a sense for that yet?
I think it's fairly audible, because I think they really are targeting AirPods Pro as your modifier for group environments.
Well, and I think that they keep on having it. While it's something that is somewhat of a solitary experience that you're experiencing, that there's a lot of places where they're merging the real world into the virtual, and I think that's going to be so. Being able to hear what you're hearing, I think, does make a difference. I'm interested to see if there's some kind of mirroring that's going to be available so that you can see what the person's seeing, because I think that's from just a pure gaming perspective, or being able to stream something, you want to be able to see that.
It was interesting too. I don't know if you saw Ben Thompson's write-up after the event, but there was this one line in it where he's like, you see the father recording the video of his kids playing, but then you see him watching it at night alone. Did the father get kicked out because he wouldn't take the helmet off, and now that's all he has left of his family? the 3D videos that he recorded.
One thing that I thought was interesting there is, a lot of us, when we looked at that, we were like, oh, that's going to be really weird to record stereo just by putting the headset on. Wouldn't it be great if the iPhone was able to record stereo?
Yeah.
And I think that I would be I went from going, I don't think that's going to happen, to I'd be really surprised if we don't see an iPhone 15. And all they have to do is square up two of those lenses, make two identical ones. Now, they could put two whole sets. Chris sent me a picture I think he made of two whole sets on the corners, so they're interocular and you can do all the different lengths. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that if you take the two widest lenses, or not maybe the 0.5, but the ones, and you put them together side by side, you're going to end up with the ability. You have to remember that even though it's not interocular with the LiDAR and with some creative computing, you can build something that looks like stereo. It may not be as good as interocular. I don't think that they'll put them on either side. I would prefer that.
Yes.
To have them on either side of the phone, shooting it so that I really got more a stereo feel. But even if they just have them side by side, like they did with the hydrogen, I know that the hydrogen stuff still produces great content.
Yes. Did you look at the format at all that they introduced for the immersive video?
I haven't had time to dig through that yet. It's been a busy week. Have you looked at it much?
I did. I didn't look at it much, but I saw what the specs for it, like 180 degrees, and they want to capture so much stuff. And I'm interested in whether Disney might start adopting that, and then or other houses might start adopting that, and where we'll see.
We've been doing a lot of 180 in the past, and I think that. Of course, they bought NextVR, so a lot of that what they're doing is probably driven into that model. The 180, the 360 doesn't really make a lot of sense because they're for a whole bunch of reasons. One is I got to throw way more data at you from a pure streaming perspective and processing perspective. The other is it's really hard to protect people behind the camera protect things and people. We did a test shoot at a concert in 360. And the people behind us were doing stuff that they shouldn't do, and it was like they don't realize they're standing right in front of a camera, right in front of a camera. Unfortunately, it was a test and it wasn't published, but because they don't think they'd be working the next day. But the main thing is that it was the concert was great, but there was no reason to turn around. And so I think that you're going to see 180. I do think you're going to see an explosion of people. There's all this technology is sitting around. This is the fourth time we've gone through this stereo thing.
Did you hear from the people who watched the basketball and the sports demos? Because what they didn't realize and it sounds like they're watching this demo and they literally feel like they're courtside because it's filmed from a courtside seat. And they only realized later that the camera never moved because it didn't have to, because you felt like you were there. And when you're there, you don't move.
Well,
so they captured it from a position. We've
learned that over time is that you when you go into 180, you don't move the camera. Because it actually makes people sick. But it also, you just let them roam around inside of that experience. And we've done courtside, NBA courtside with stereo 180 and with 360. And it is really impressive. The only thing that wasn't impressive is the resolution wasn't high enough and the frame rate wasn't high enough. We were at 2K 30 instead of 4K 60, which is, we believe no one's really said frame rate, but they say that they're polling at 12 milliseconds. And so we're extrapolating that to be 83 frames a second or something in the vicinity.
I've heard around 90.
Yeah. So that is a much different experience than what we've seen in the past. So.
And these grizzled journalists, they were like, I would pay $1,000 for a subscription to courtside basketball on this thing.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Go ahead, Jason.
So as far as the stereoscopic recording, I mean, right now that 2x zoom that the iPhone currently does is a combination of the 1 and the 3. So, I mean, I see no reason why they couldn't do some sort of bizarre little modification to take that calculated 2x and make that some sort of stereoscopic thing, especially with the LiDAR.
I just think if they just move it so the two lenses are next to each other, it solves a lot of problems. The real problem with computational. Oh, you mean that? Yeah, that could. But they could do it with computational. I hope they don't. It's really hard for stereo to work well, and the problem that has dogged stereo production. If they have those, it's bad stereo production. and so the thing is that I just hope that they give us two identical lenses that are designed to do the thing, and they're not doing computational calculations on it. But I don't know if that might be me being too optimistic about what they want to do. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as Rene pointed out, Apple is usually not first in the market, but they try and improve on the market. If they are going to go the route of the 3D stereo phone, I might remind you that they have been around for a long time, and here is a startling list of 3D-enabled mobile phones going back to 2002. The ones with double green on the right have both displays, cameras, and HDMI output. These are all phones that have been enabled with stereo 3D, and the list is very long. Most of them are in China, some of them are in Japan, and a few are in the United States. But, You may not realize that there are this many different brands of 3D stereo phones out there right now. It is amazing.
Well, and the big thing that Apple has is they have a headset for it that'll be tied directly into the output. So you're going to be able to shoot with your, if they put it into the phone, you'll be able to pick that phone up, shoot it, send it to a friend with a headset, and they're able to, so it's not going to, I think that what they showed was someone putting the headset on, but in reality, what's going to happen is people are going to shoot a video of their kids. The husband that they saw there is going to be in his hotel room because he's on a sales meeting, and the wife is going to shoot the video of the birthday gift, of the birthday thing, and then send it to him, and it's going to feel like he's sitting there in front of it. And I think that those are the kind of experiences that are probably more likely what's going to happen in the not too distant future.
I think it'll be like live photos where you have, like, right now we have a static photo that can animate if you wanted to, and like you'll be able to take a video that you can watch on your phone, but if you're wearing the headset, it has all that extra information.
I think so.
In.
Yeah. So I think that it's just going to be capturing a lot of that data, and I think it's a pretty interesting puzzle. So it'll be interesting. You're going to say something, Rene?
Oh, I was just saying, like, you and I were at CES together back when you had the Google Glass on, and you were like a one-man CES coverage army, and we went to that Sony thing where they were telling us the future of everything is 3D, and it looks like horrendously wrong-headed in retrospect, but they had the 3D cameras, the 3D phones, the 3D televisions, and all of that technology. And now, literally 10 years later, we're seeing like a much more mature version of that.
Yeah, and again, I think that people underestimate the value of frame rate and resolution. That when we saw in the lab, we saw high frame rate, high resolution, and you're like, this is the future. So I think that people who said this is the future were looking at hardware that wasn't existing and was like, oh, we'll get down to that. Instead, we tried to make it inexpensive, but making it inexpensive meant we couldn't get that resolution. We couldn't get that frame rate. And without the resolution and frame rate that we were looking for, we just didn't get the experience that had people go, oh, I have to have this. And so Apple's going, now they have that piece of it. So it'll be really interesting. Let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
Comes to us from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Mark Zuckerberg's comment, quote, I think that their announcement really showcases the difference in the values and the vision that our companies bring to this, close quote. Panelists' thoughts or ideas on what he said?
Yeah, go ahead, Rene.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think like Apple and Facebook have profoundly different visions for, like, I remember Greg Joswiak last year said on one of the calls, someone said, like, what do you think of the metaverse? And he said, I think that's a word that's never going to leave my mouth. Because Facebook really thinks like they're building this world where you're going to go into and you'll be putting like face dollars into their face vending machine to get their face products. And you'll look up at your kid's school and see like an ad for paper towels spinning around on top of it. And they think you're going to live in here and they're going to make this whole different virtual world for you. Where I think Apple's idea is like, this is the next generation of screens. I think that's why like Tim Cook has been willing to talk about this more than any other product. Like he's willing to talk about AI and virtual reality and augmented reality, because for them, it's not the end game. It is the next generation of products. It's like talking about LED back in the era of the iMac. Like we went from CRT to LED, yes, to make that iMac, but then you could never have made a CRT iPhone. Like you could never have made a CRT iPad. That is a technology, like a base technology, displays, flat panels that let them create all these other products around it. And I think now we're looking at a similar thing where Apple's vision for, like, no pun intended, but their vision for this is something you put on, you dip into, you interact with people, you go in and out of, but it doesn't replace your world. It's meant to enhance your world. And we'll see other products build off of that.
I have to admit that I thought before we saw it that it was going to be more closed off and that you'd have to figure out how you take it on, put it on, take it off, put it on. And I realized very quickly that a lot of people are just going to leave it on. Like they're just going to put it on and leave it on. And as people walk into the room, they'll talk to them and then they walk out. I mean, they're not going to sit there and watch TV with it their family.
That's an advantage for Facebook because with Facebook, they're always worried you're going to close the browser window or close the Facebook app. But if it's on your face, it's much harder for you to exit a Facebook experience.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting. Yeah. John?
Rene said it well. This is Mark crying a little bit. Don't look at Apple's new headset. Ours came out last week. So a little bit of that. So Zuck was on Lex Friedman last night, and he articulates this whole vision of what he means ad nauseum.
You good, Bill?
As a public statement, though, I have to give props to the PR professional who was able to use that many words yet say virtually nothing that's going to resonate with the wider audience. That's pretty great practicing of public relations.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the hard part is I think you're going to eventually be able to go into an Apple store and put these on and look at them. And The problem is that, and I think this was the problem for a lot of us that have worked in this, is that once you see the better quality, especially with something on your head, it's really hard to go back. And this is going to be a huge problem for all the cheaper headsets, is that once a press person has seen it, they're going to go, it doesn't look close. Like I haven't seen the Apple one, but I can tell you from the ones that I've seen that are higher resolution and higher frame rate, that the experience on a Quest is painful after you've seen what could be done. And I think that that's going to be something that is just really devastating too, because I think the press is going to turn a little south on the other headsets. You know, a lot of things are going to turn south on it because it's just really hard to get that out of your head, that it was like, oh, it was just seamless and it all just worked and there wasn't any of this stuff. And they're just going to be, the press is going to be frustrated with the smaller headsets. They're going to put less energy into them. There's going to be, you know, I don't think it's going to energize the lower end of it. Sometimes it does. Sometimes a big thing hits and it energizes it. I don't think that's what's going to happen here. Yeah, go to Rene.
It's going to be a non-pro version. I mean, I think deliberately putting pro in the branding is a huge signal that we understand this is $3,500, but it's the pro version. And if you've looked at any of our other product lines, we've had minis and nanos and non-pros and maxes. Yeah. And it speaks to like this being like they didn't just introduce the Apple Vision, they introduced the Apple Vision Pro, which is a huge, bold app, like an uncharacteristically bold Apple statement that this is the first of a new family.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Emily Russo in Nashville, Tennessee. A lot of the graphics designers I work with are interested in using this for their work, but also getting up to speed on the UI UX design. Any suggestions on what they should focus on?
Go ahead, Bill.
I watched one of the WWDC videos about this specifically. There is a set of UX guidelines for working and programming for Vision, and they were really specific. So if you're interested in this, go to the WWDC thing. I don't even think you have to be a developer anymore. I think you can just log in and do that and look at some of the first videos that are going up. You'll see exactly where they're going with how much design space to leave for things programmed for this unit.
You go to Rene.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Like Apple famously has human interface guidelines, HIG, which are updated every year after WWDC to talk about all the new things. And there absolutely is going to be a HIG for this as we ramp up development. But also what people were saying who used it is that it is stunningly accurate. Like we're used to multi-touch where you have to have a huge touch point and a lot of affordance because especially as you go further away on larger screens, like you're just not that accurate. But this, like it's looking exactly where your eye is and all those cameras are exactly focused. And the precision with which they're detecting that makes me think that this is going to be like you're going to be able to go a much higher density in terms of interface eventually than what we're looking at now.
Yeah, I think I would pay a lot of attention to what Apple has laid out as what's there and really look at those guidelines because they're the only ones with the headset so far. And then the other thing is that I would, you can build some of these things and get them into your Oculus headset just to understand how things look. Like what does that actually look like there? But I think that you're going to pay attention to that. And it's going to be very hard. I think that a lot of people are going to buy this just because they're trying to figure out how to develop for it. I think the first couple million are going to be people trying to make sure they don't miss out on the opportunity. Marcelo?
Yeah, there's a new, on WWDC, if you go, and I was attending online, there's a new property for Swift. So you can actually see what the depth is going to be on the UI and how you will push things forward or backwards depending on where people sees or how you interact with those things. So it's very cool.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard until you have the headset. That's the bottom line. Because I've been working in immersive stuff for almost 30 years and in different levels and got to watch this for a very long time. And it's just, you have people come in with it's the same thing with like surround sound. The first time someone does something, they do a lot of crazy things. Or first they do either nothing or they do a lot of crazy things. And then it settles into, we're just doing a little bit of this and we're making this, it becomes a much more subtle thing. But I think that playing with it and making sure you understand how the development tools are going to work and then being able to, as soon as the headset comes out, cross-check what you're doing, I think that's going to be the key to the operation. Next question.
Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania is up next. At the $3,500 U.S. price point for the Vision Pro, do you think companies might subsidize a portion of that cost if you subscribe to their service?
They might. I mean, I don't know how much of that they'll do, but I think that it's not a big enough market for most of them to do that. So if you're talking about cell companies or other things, I think that they're probably going to just make you pay for it. I think Apple's also going to be I don't think Apple really cares how many they sell. I mean, in the grand sense of they will sell as many as they want to sell, but I don't think that. I think we're going to have the device is so complicated and so hard to make. When I say Apple will sell as many as that they can make, I think that has to do with I just don't know how many they can make in the first year. You were going to say, Rene?
No, I was just agreeing with you. Like, you just nailed it. Like, people are going to say it's way too expensive, and then they're going to be like, how come I can't order one? Why is it going to come in 6 months?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I don't know if Apple's capable of making more than 1 million or 2 in the first year. And I think that they'll sell all that they can make. But I think that I don't know if they can mass produce these. These are a brand new product. It's a brand new line. It's complicated and hard. It's a really hard device to make. And I think people underestimate that. So I just don't think that they even view it as a mass market product. They need people, if we look at this being the Pro, and they need people to buy the regular one in 2025, 2026. They're only looking for enough people to develop content for it, to build that out. They're not looking to turn this into the next iPhone next year. Though I think that they see that as, and I think Apple has the ability to be much more patient than everyone else. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm a little less bullish on this product. I think its application will eventually move into the industrial and vertical market applications like the HoloLens has done. And the HoloLens, I might point out, HoloLens 2, which is their AR product from Microsoft, has been around for 7 years. There are a number of vertical market applications for it. It's priced exactly the same, $3,500 for the version 1, but it goes up. Look at the 2 different industrial edition. There is a Trimble makes an XR10 for $5,000. So these are industrial applications, and they have custom software written for the needs of AR, where it comes into use. I didn't see any applications during the Apple demo of any application that the consumer could do better on the Vision than they could with just 3 monitors for doing work, and
3 monitors
and
in a hotel.
And the problem of the user interface is that it's touch, eyeball, and finger clicking. So you have to get used to a whole new way of working when you're using that headset. I suppose there's probably going to be a mouse interface so that you can use a conventional mouse or a trackball if you want to.
Yep.
And of course, a keyboard for entering text. So
I think they've already shown that
productivity,
you can have your regular keyboard and your mouse there and
Right.
be interacting with it already. So it's all built. That's all built into it as far
but
as.
it
the interface
seems to be
goes.
more of a consumer device, for consuming entertainment than for
I think
creativity. I think
I would say that I think it's a lifestyle device. I mean, it's going to be something that some people just put on for long periods. I think it's designed to be on for long periods of time. Where
I don't think so. I don't think. I think the people that have tried it, and there's just a precious few, said it was a little heavy, and they didn't know about, since it's covering up and has a tight fit around the eyes, unlike other, like the HoloLens I just mentioned, which doesn't touch your eyes at all. It gets kind of claustrophobic and hot. I think that's going to be a problem for wearing it for extended periods of time all day long.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, obviously we won't know until it comes out. Ryan?
I think the industrial application use case is really interesting, right? I mean, if you think about the HoloLens and the Trimble application you showed there, they have one edition that's mounted to a hard hat. And if you can integrate that design a little bit better, you'll probably take care of some of the weight issues. And to the point around, should we consider this as an alternative to 3 screens in front of us? Well, if we're in the field, we can't have 3 screens in front of us. Currently, our option is our phone or an iPad, and the opportunity for immersive experience to be able to have an expert sitting off-site, right? That's kind of circling the particular thing that needs to get dealt with, and somebody less experienced on-site is an application that they might not jump into in year 1, but certainly will in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's being on a plane, being in a hotel room. You can take those monitors with you, but it's a lot to carry. So go ahead.
Marquez briefcase.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I travel with monitors. I think the amount of time that you'll be able to wear the headset will be determined by the point at which you get beat up by some bully because they think you're a nerd. It'll last that long.
I don't think because of their nature, I mean, we don't see a lot of people with Oculus out outside. I don't think we're going to see a lot of people wandering around streets or going to restaurants with these on. I think that there is an opportunity because they're AR. I think that there's going to be some interesting opportunities in theaters, but it'll be designed for that, where you're adding things to it. But I think that outside of areas that are very specifically designed for the headset, I don't see a lot of people walking around outside with them. I think that this is going to be a much more of a home use kind of experience. And I think that, again,
isolationism.
Maybe. But I think that
to me, I honestly, I look at it and I just see this as a sad development in humanity. Like, why would Apple, a company that's all about, reaching out and making music and making content and stuff, create something that just literally isolates people into a little bubble? And I got to say, one of the things I really like about office hours is that I now have friends that use PCs, which I never had before the pandemic. And it's very seldom that I completely agree with Courtney, but I do.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, go ahead, Marcelo.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is I used one of the first Oculus, I think it was the Oculus Rift. I don't remember quite the name, but I remember that the setup was completely complex to do and you needed a space. You remember you have to put sensors on your office or whatever you're putting them and then mark them up. If you have, a good setup and you just make it work, I remember it was phenomenal. I felt like I was in the Matrix, and then I checked the time and it was over 3 hours that I was in it and I didn't even notice that. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. So I can't imagine what the VisionPro will be looking like today if the setup is going to be this way and you don't need any other sensors or anything like that for doing the things that you need on the times that you need to do them. And once you don't use them anymore, just take it off and that's it.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Chris, I have one word for you, motorcycle. You're right. Nobody's going to want to get in a car with a bunch of people when they can ride on a motorcycle inside a helmet, cut off from the world for hours at a time, when you can get in a car with 4 people and have a discussion.
I don't think you'll be able to wear these on
people are different. There will be a
motorcycle.
lot of people who'll be very happy to check out for a good period of time and do something productive.
And I will say, when you think about commuters, like, I don't know how other people fly, but I can tell you how I fly. I have this special headset or face thing that goes over that doesn't touch my eyes. It's like little cavities. And I have my AirPod Maxes, and I've got this little neck brace, and I've got my Scotty vest. And I literally get into a window seat. I put those on, and I am gone until, and I just listen to music. I am gone until we land. I have no interest in the food. I have no interest in the people. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be left alone. And that is a big billboard in, now it doesn't mean that I'm social every day with you, Chris. I'm sitting there talking to people. I'm connected. I hang out with my family. I do all these other things, but there are definitely times when I don't want to have any interaction with anybody. And I think this is providing a huge opportunity to make that really, really enjoyable. Go ahead, Rene.
You don't understand. I am better than you.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying. I'm just saying that there's a real opportunity for me to not have to interact. And like, as someone who's done, used to do 250,000 miles a year, being in a 10-hour flight and I was watching stuff on my iPad or my iPhone, and I did it with an Oculus, and the Oculus was really fun. It was just a little too low resolution, but at the same time, with the higher resolution and the immersiveness, being able to sit and watch movie after movie and feel like you're in a theater is going to be really compelling for people on trains and planes. And I don't think it'll be on the back of cars. The one thing I will say is that I think that in cars, it will be very hard because people will get sick because you can feel emotion. And I think that's going to be a problem. Go ahead, Rene.
Yeah, I think also, like, one thing Apple does really, really well, and you brought this up earlier, was just how patient they are. And when you look at even Steve Jobs and his vision for like networked computers was years ahead of its time. And Tim Cook famously is just very forward thinking. And when Apple talks about automation, yes, they mean a car, but they also mean eventually like robots, like consumer robots, all these different things. And the same way here, when they're talking about AR and mixed reality, and I think spatial computing, the reason they wanted to coin that term is that this is a very long arc of human history that we're approaching. And I've bought almost every headset. Like, I've bought Oculus Rift and Valve Index and HTC Vive and Vive Pro and the original Quest and the Quest 2. And I've tried them all, and they've been like really interesting. But I think as you go through that long arc, you have this headset today, and one day we'll get down to maybe tethered but not glasses, and then you go further down the long arc and you start to get to like, if we think the future of computing is Jarvis, where you were like manipulating things in the air and talking and having like these large language models and generative AI responding to you and building things, and you're designing and coding and doing all these tasks in like a mixed reality environment. How do we get from there to here? And I guess one day we'll get to like the cyberpunk universe of us having to decide if we put the Apple R13 chip like right next to our brainstem or something. But like all of this is like external cybernetics right now. It's like the core of what it is. It's why we have like AirPods for enhanced hearing and now Vision for enhanced seeing. And that's just going to continue until, and like, of course, like my iPhone is already my external memory. It's like, it's so much of my information now. It is all cybernetics. And I think they see where that future is going in terms of automation and mixed reality. And these are the pieces of the puzzle that they have to put in place now so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they're still a vibrant, relevant company, unlike many of their tech peers.
And I also think that this goes hand in hand with a self-driving car where you just sit in the car and put the headset on and do your thing. And not have to, and the car takes you where you need to go and you do what you need to do. I think that it's not that far away. Next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico City, Mexico. The Apple Vision Pro has an impressive list of accessibility features. Is this Apple focusing this device for more than productivity and entertainment?
Go ahead, Javier.
I think Apple is one of the brands that take care of accessibility the more. I think they have great features in all of their products, and they keep getting better. Like, for example, the iPhone, when it got lighter, we started having the measuring things, and then it tells you like someone is coming and there's a door, and they can keep adding on. So I think accessibility is gonna go like a long way. And also like different Apple products, like Apple has like this runway, they can add things. Like for example, the AirPods started like, okay, we have noise cancel and adaptive noise cancel. And now they tell you, it sense when someone is coming. So we basically have hearing aids. So Apple's always like tried to get new things in their products. So I'm sure this, at least for me, this device, I think let's say the immersive things like the VR things would be more the entertainment and productivity, and the AR or the things that will help you with your surroundings are going to be like a different sort of features that it will have. So I think it have like a lot of applications.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I didn't see the necessarily accessibility applications for the Vision Pro. I mean, if you're if you don't have good eyesight, you're kind of wasting a lot of money on really high resolution displays that block off your existing field of vision, whatever that may be, if you have macular degeneration, et cetera. So I'm not sure the applications for accessibility, as Javier was pointing out, they could come up with applications that use the front-facing cameras and the LiDAR sensor to warn you about sightless persons, to warn them about things that are coming into their field of contact. But there are other devices that are already designed to do that that are probably much cheaper and much more accessible, that give you audible warnings, kind of like a holographic acoustical environment that you can sightless people can use to navigate their field of vision. I think it'd be kind of overpriced for that application.
Yeah, but I do think that one thing that we found with VR is that adding accessibility features is much easier than in the real world, because we can put it anywhere. So we can have heads-up displays. We can give you tons of extra information, especially if in some areas. And I think that people who, again, this is going to be useful for people who have limited mobility, of being able to go to places and see things and be part of things that they couldn't be part of otherwise. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Apple stock peaked right before the WWDC keynote and then stayed down for 3 days. Was it too much hype, or was it a price shock on the goggles? Other reasons?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I don't think personally that it was as much about price as it was about the timing of the release. In a high interest rate environment, if those cash flows are pushed out 12 months, there's a lot less present value to those cash flows than there is if this is only 6 months away.
Good, Rene.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely expected and normal behavior. Like people, the market buys on rumor and they sell on news. That's just historically how it's gone. And when you Like there's this famous Jim Cramer video you can go and find from 10 years ago where he's like, what happens is you hear Apple's going to put out a phone. So you call the Apple media and they really hate Apple. So you tell them Verizon's not going to pick it up and the phone's going to be delayed. And because you need to be able to make your short put. And so they start spreading all these rumors and the people start selling the stock and I start making a fortune. And then you go to your friend over here. So like the market is one, historically, again, buys on rumors, sells on news because anticipation expectations rise. And then when you have the news, it's definite and people start to sell. But also there's so much market manipulation going on all the time that is how a lot of these that is how a lot of some of these people make their quarters.
Next question.
Juanzi Robles, again, Mexico City, given Apple announcing the end of the transition to Apple Silicon, how much time do you think Apple will keep support for the Intel platform?
I think it would probably be the typical pipeline. You know, I think it's a couple of years, a couple of versions that they will support things, and then I don't think they'll end of life it in the same speed that they end of life any other hardware. Go ahead, Rene.
Yeah, I think exactly the same. The only question I have in my mind is, are they going to start the clock with the Mac Pro because that's the last one, or are they going to think the Mac Pro is such a niche market that they're going to start the clock like a year or two ago when they had all the mainstream computers out?
Yeah, I think the hard part I think Apple wants to make sure people feel supported, you know, so I think that's the only, you know, they don't want, it's not worth, I think for Apple, it's not worth the bad press for this small amount of support because there's just not that many of them out there. So I think but we'll see. It'll be interesting. Next question.
What's the new versions? I mean, like the new versions of macOS, are those good? Like how many new versions of macOS is Intel going to get?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two or three typically. I mean, I think that they won't cut people off any faster than they cut people off normally, but they cut people off pretty fast.
Yes.
I mean, Apple is the most aggressive company in. I'm not going to. You know, you move forward, and it's a huge advantage for developers. Now, developers will complain about it, but it's a huge advantage to know that almost your entire ecosystem is on a modern operating system. Being able to develop for that. I mean, I know that. When we developed we developed a couple pieces of software for both Mac and PC. And for the Mac, we had 4 things we had to check, 4 pieces of hardware, configurations, and so on and so forth. And for the PC, we had 27. And we were just like, oh my goodness. And we lasted about a year before we stopped developing for the PC. Because, I mean, if it was a Mac, because we were selling a lot of product and, you know, the PCs were 10% of the revenue and 90% of the problems, and so we were just like, this isn't adding up for us. So yeah, so I think that, but I think they'll continue to push people forward. But I don't think that they'll drop it off the platform any faster than they have in the past. They have a pretty set. I don't remember what it is, but it's a pretty set thing where they close it off. Next question.
Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania. Apple purchases Mira a day after the VisionPro announcement. What will they do with this purchase?
Mira, to Courtney's point, has a lot of vertical markets, and so there's military roles. There's a lot of other things for lightweight. There's a lot more AR, like pure AR is really what they specialize in. So I think that they're definitely I think you're going to see Apple make more and more acquisitions of especially smaller companies. That are, sub billion, sub 500 million. They're just going to keep on hoovering up these companies to make sure that they can, they're often grabbing them for patents. They're grabbing them for it's an acqui-hire for a lot of these things, and so there's a lot of different reasons that they'll pull them in. But I think you're going to probably see they quietly buy many, many, many companies, to solve a lot of these problems. Go, Bill.
I'm not so much sure that they're buying a thing as they are buying a bunch of people. I mean, they will have some expertise and something that will be directly relative to what they're doing here.
Yeah. Next question.
Chris Clark in Tempe, Arizona. Do you imagine that a remotely controlled robot could wear this headset as a window back to the robot operator?
Go ahead, John.
The robots will have this architecture built into them. The Tesla Optimus is using the exact same technology that they use in the cars. The cars have 9 cameras in them. Yeah. And so that information can easily be remote controlled. And that's exactly what they showed at the shareholder meeting.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's no need for the robot to wear the headset. The operator would be wearing the headset. The robot would have built-in sensors. There's no reason for the robot to have display screens that cover its cameras. Its cameras can do the work themselves.
Go ahead, Ryan.
You've got an interesting problem right now where the really qualified field workforce is aging out and less interested in being out in harsh environments. And so as we see, a different workforce come into the harsh environment and outdoor environment, what I think is interesting is, like I mentioned earlier, the operator and the person in the back office wearing them and being able to kind of give remote direction and advice. And Microsoft has painted a vision for that I hope Apple dives into as well, or invests in as well.
Yeah, some of the most impressive things that I saw with Microsoft is they were doing LiDAR and with a HoloLens, and they were LiDARing every day, and in some cases I didn't see it. They were talking about the dog, but the dog hadn't been released yet. They're now using a Boston Dynamics dog that's integrated with a Leica scanner that just walks through the work site every day and scans it all out. But they were still doing scans of these work sites, and being able to stand in a space, a relatively small space in an office 2,000 miles away, looking at your construction and going, like you'd see the LiDAR scan, you'd see the models of what it was supposed to do. You saw the breakdown of the timeline of what was happening versus the timeline that you had for that construction. I thought it was just amazing. You could see that we're behind over here, but ahead over here. It turned out in one case that they showed us that the beams were before they poured concrete, that they had put rebar into the wrong place, like just by a little, but it was going to be and it's something that happens all the time in construction, but they were able to see that immediately because the scans are coming in every day and make those error corrections when they're not on site, and they're not able to make all those measurements every single time to make sure it was working. It wasn't major, but it was pretty interesting. Go ahead, Ryan.
The other thing that'll have an impact on is litigation, right? So when we're 2 years kind of post-launch of a building and an issue is uncovered, like that tower in San Francisco that's leaning, the daisy chain of litigation begins. And having captured all of those scans, while they probably could have prevented the issue in the first place, will now at least allow us to get back to the answer of, was it the design spec? Was it the contractor that poured the foundation, or somebody else in the mix?
Was it not going all the way down to the bedrock? Like maybe new math wasn't as good as old math, which was, we got to get to the bedrock. Next question.
Joe Kidd in the Bay Area in California. Spatial video seems magical, enabled in part by the VisionPro's higher-powered true-depth camera system. What would the panel estimate as the effective capture volume relative to capture position?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not sure. The video that they showed seemed to be a square type aspect ratio rather than a full 4K or UHD capture position. So I don't think we're really sure what kind of format. Other people have speculated that the resolution is 3800 by 3000. So, it's closer to a square aspect ratio for capture rather than a standard commercial UHD.
Go ahead, Bill.
And they talked about some of this in what I referenced earlier, the WWDC online version of it. Just do a search under, I think, Video or Reality Pro, and you should be able to find that session where they talked about how larger items that you're moving towards scale at the correct way to keep everything clear in your vision field.
Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. Any thoughts about the building of photorealistic avatars?
Rene, what did you think of those avatars?
They were like one of those things where I'm like quasi dystopian, uncanny, and I haven't seen them because
I was like,
no, well, I mean, like full disclosure, I work at Google, and Google has Skyline, and if anyone saw Marquez's recent video on that, like it's doing something very similar, and he said it was like mind blowing when you're actually doing it. So seeing someone film it or seeing it in a demo, like it may look like not quite right, but when you see it in that immersive environment, it could be like a much bigger presence than it looks at first. So I'm going to reserve final judgment for actually seeing it and interacting with it and seeing how it goes. But you do have to solve the problem: is how do you FaceTime somebody when there's no camera on your face? And I think it was at least a novel solution.
I don't know if you need to figure that out. We were talking about.
What would you see if like I have it on me? What would like you see of me?
I don't think I'm going to use the headset for that. Like if that's unless it's unbelievable, I'm probably not going to. Especially with the setup that I have here, if I found out that a bunch of people were using headsets to join a meeting, I would 100% join with my camera and my microphone, knowing that I would be able to stand out. like it, and I think that's because I don't think it'll be competitive with a good camera. Now it might be competitive with what most people use for web cameras, but I think that it is. I feel like it's in the same way that I think that digital backgrounds and a lot of other things add to cognitive load. There's going to be something that feels wrong about it that I think is going to bother people. You go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it's a step into the uncanny valley. In fact, the eyes that you see when you're in transparent, semi-transparent mode, the actual displays are opaque, but the eyes that other people see when they're looking at you, if you have them turned on, are really just a close-up of the virtual face that you've generated for it, and it's just tracking your eye movement, your eyeball movement, and your blinking, and making the avatar eyes do the same thing. So you're not really seeing your own eyes or an image, not even an image of your own eye from the internal cameras, because I think those internal cameras are infrared and not color, and it's a color display that you're seeing on the outside.
What were you going to say, Rene?
I was going to say, just like a play on words, it's like do virtual eyes dream, or virtual eyes dreams to an electric soul, or gateways to an electric soul.
Sheep not involved.
Go ahead, Chris.
It's not. Courtney said it's would you say a step into the uncanny valley? I think it's a beautiful log cabin built smack dab in the middle of the uncanny valley. I think it's super weird.
Yeah. I think it's going to be. It was the least impressive thing that I saw in the show was the FaceTime, and I felt like they've spent all this time on memojis. I think that what we're going to see is that memojis are an option that they're going to give us. I think they didn't want that to be part of the initial press for it, but I think when it's released, memojis are going to be one of your options as opposed to the scan of you. Because I think the one thing that Apple has done better than most is that their memojis actually look better than we do. My emoji looks better than I do. Every other emoji is like when I thought the funny thing with Mark is that Mark Zuckerberg was talking about his, like we really want people to interact with each other. I was like, with those avatars, you want people to interact? I would never interact.
Do you remember the Verge video when they did like the Horizon demo and like Alex's eye was just flashing up and down and Eli's like, where are my legs? My hands are disconnected.
I would never, ever, ever interact with any of those tools. And that's the thing that I think that it's aspirational, but no. Go ahead, Javier.
I agree with Rene. We have to wait for the final version, but I think it's uncanny valley for sure. For us, that we are used to look at CGI characters, and if something is well done, well rigged, everything is gonna look weird. But I think if we don't end up with Scorpion King level CGI, most people is gonna be like, "Oh, I can take this."
But
Having
I think
said
that's what's gonna be.
Probably. Having said that, I think I would go the Memoji route as well. I'm pretty sure it's going to do it because that's going to be, most people use the virtual backgrounds and they use the avatars and they are fine with it. So I think it's bad for us, but for people like normal people, I think we're going to, it's have to step out of those kind of looks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
I just want to know how many days it's going to be until, after the release of the device, when it plays Doom 2 instead of putting your eyes there. Because that just needs to happen.
Last question for the day.
And Rene, I want a t-shirt that says quasi-utopian. Robert Soji in Los Angeles, do you think the Apple Vision Pro marks the beginning of the end of the Apple laptop and or PC?
Good, Courtney.
No, unless you're going to travel around to Starbucks with a backpack full of lithium-ion batteries or lead-acid batteries that let you power the Vision Pro for 9 hours at a time. The laptop is still going to have a place in portable work as a portable work device. And the PC, I think you're going to find that the uncomfortableness of wearing something on your face and isolating yourself when you're just sitting at home working is too big a leap for people to make. So no, I don't think it'll replace either one of those.
Good, Bill.
I don't think so either. And, we have too much load of learning to type and things like that. Although I was interested in the videos that I watched on WWDC about how they've made, as your fingers get closer to the virtual keys, they get brighter. And then as you actuate them, there is a auditory click that helps you understand. They've really put a lot of effort into trying to make this as tactile-ish an experience as is possible.
Rene.
Yeah, I think like the as popular as the iPhone is, the iPhone didn't eclipse Mac, but it didn't destroy the Mac. Like the Mac is still out there, people are still using it, and I think it always goes back to that analogy: is that we had clocks in the town square, and then we had clocks in our living room, and then we had clocks in our pockets, and then we had clocks on our wrists. And I think the same is true with computing: is that we had computers in giant, like at IBM and at universities and in the military. And then we had computers in our desks, and then we had computers in our pockets. And now we have computers on our wrists, and we have a 10-core audio processing unit in our ears, and we're going to have computers on our faces, and computers is just going to become ambient. And every time they can't always do everything that the larger version of that did, but they can do some things more conveniently and uniquely than any of the predecessors could do. Like I don't have to go back to my Mac if I have my phone with me for 50% of the tasks that I want to do. And then for my watch, it's just like for notifications and for a lot of stuff, I don't have to go to my phone. I'm so lazy now, I get it out of my pocket. I just glance at it. And now I won't even have to turn my wrist. It's just going to be right there on my face. So the convenience delta and a functionality delta. And it's just, we're going to keep pushing that until we do have, like, we go from spatial to ambient computing. And then that's the next thing.
I guess I'll say maybe, only because I thought that when people texted it was weird, and now it's my primary form of communication, some version of text. Like I just don't like email. Like I go days without checking my email. But if you text me, you'll get an immediate response. So it's a different, I shouldn't tell people that, because no, I'm gonna get a bunch of texts. Rene, thank you so much for joining us. It was good to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was just texting you.
And thanks to the panel for all of your input. Great answers in the first hour, and great discussion in the second hour. Really appreciate all of you being here. We can't do it without you. Thanks to the producers for all the great questions. We never know what we're going to talk about. We just get up here and we just go, okay, well, what are people going to want us to talk about? And so that's all up to you. It's great when you get in there. We've got a bunch of questions at the beginning that we know that we're going to get out of the gate with. So thank you so much for getting those questions in early and getting them in often. Keep on adding to those, and make sure to vote on those questions so that we know what's available there. Quick reminder that we do have a volunteer meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. So you can check the emails that go out if you're interested in being part of these crews, whether it's a panel or the incredible crew that actually gets this done every single day. There is a small village of people who are managing this, organizing it, programming it, executing it. We just really appreciate all the contribution that everyone makes. And if you're interested in being part of that team, again, have a volunteer meeting tomorrow, and you can find out more information in the email that goes out every day. And we'll put something in Discord as well. 77,000 miles we traveled today answering these questions, 124,000 kilometers. And that's more than 611 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Such a fun day.
Hey, Alex, Courtney and I are doing a new podcast together. We're called Rough. We're going to review monitors, like real 27-inch, We're going to just review legitimate monitors. What do you think?
I think you just call it 27-inch. And only review 27-inch monitors. This is a good 27-inch monitor. This is a good 27-inch
I will never
monitor.
edit wearing a headset, ever.
Is that even a vertical, or is that actually technically a diagonal?
I can't wait to see if that happens or not.
Unfortunately, curmudgeon computing is too long.
Yeah.